We are live.
Okay,
Let's
shall I
have
get
over to you.
started? All right. Folks, welcome to the Real China series. My name is Ethel Kanthan. I'm based out of Bangalore, India. And we usually do this on Spaces on Twitter. But today we are trying a new format on streaming both on YouTube and Twitter. And we have two wonderful guests, Jerry and Fernando. They both have been living in China for a long time, and they both are geopolitical experts, writers, social media influencers, very fascinating people. And we will not be going way too much into geopolitical issues and the hardcore topics. So the goal of the interview, is just to let for us to get to know the life in China. So what is it like in day-to-day life? So how do people work, live, and will interact with the government? What is the society like? Because these are the fundamental issues where there is a lot of misconception that we see on social media. So let's jump right in. We're gonna like maybe spend 1 hour or so based on how much with time Jerry and Fernando have. So Jerry and Fernando, thank you so much for coming. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Isel, for having us.
Well, awesome. So let's start with the big picture. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from originally? Where do you live in China? And how long have you been living in China? We can start with Fernando.
All right. So just making sure that everybody knows where we're streaming. We're streaming to YouTube and Twitter as well. Unfortunately, it's only my Twitter. So go there and have a look and follow us also. It's not a space, it's a video. Okay. So my name is Fernando Munoz Bernal. I am from Colombia and I moved to China exactly on December 28th, 2001. I came here with a 3 year plan to explore my professional career here in China, um, with plans to move to other countries around Asia. Um, but I got the bug. Basically, I saw China and I saw how different it was from the ideas that were planted in my head at the time. And I thought this is a place that has an enormous potential and I could really make a make a name for myself here in China. So at that point, I decided this is where I'm going to develop my career, and I started working towards being my own man here, setting up my companies, and um, living here. So that's a decision that was made for me at around 2005. After 3 or 4 years of being in the country, I said, like, okay, I'm going all in. This is what I'm doing. And yeah, basically, I'm an educator. I'm a language teacher, English, French, Spanish. And since
Wow,
2017, I
that's a
started
lot of languages.
three and a half. My Mandarin is Mama Huhu. And in 2017, I started this new endeavor of YouTube. So I started making videos about teaching in China. That's why my handle is China Teacher. And my channel used to be called China Teacher. I wanted to help people wanting to come to China navigate the hurdles that were very real. There was a lot of pitfalls and a lot of challenges and risks involving coming to teach in China at the time. Right now, it's much more straightforward. So that was the purpose of the channel. Yeah. So slowly, little by little, it started morphing into something else, into a channel that is well beyond just the sphere of teaching and more into showing people what China is about and what China is like, and trying to tackle some of the misinformation, misunderstanding, and misinterpretation of China from the eyes of a person who has been here for 22 years, 23 years, and who has worked closely with local governments in trying to make the cities better and trying to bring East and West together. This was highlighted in 2011 when the city where I live actually granted me honorary citizenship. So that's quite unique because of my contributions to the city. So yeah, I think that like everyone that you interview here from China will come from a different area with a different perspective and with different experiences, and I think that that's what this show is about, showing the different colors and the different flavors that China offers to people, to foreigners. So that's me. So on to you guys.
Fantastic. Wow. Okay. So I have a lot of follow-up questions on that, but first we'll go to Jerry.
Okay, I'm a little like Fernando. I came here in 2004, so I'm in my 20th year. I haven't quite hit the big two yet, so I call it 2 decades of living in China, but it's actually a few months short of that. I, like Fernando, came here as an educator. I came here as a language teacher, nothing more. I planned to stay 8 months. I had a contract from October until June the following year, and the contract was extended. I was happy about that because I was enjoying my life here. When the contract ended, or before the contract ended, I think I just decided I'm not ready to go home yet, and I haven't really seen enough of China. And I started
Mhm.
looking around for another job, and I found another job. In finding another job, I met my wife, and the rest is history. I went through a variety of different careers. I've worked in management. I've worked in training. I was training manager for a very large British company here, and then I finished my career as an IELTS examiner. A lot of people who are non-native English speakers will know what the IELTS, the International English Language Testing System exam is. And I was an examiner for that exam, working for the British Council until I retired in 2018. And so effectively now I just fill my life with social media, and I'm considered to be a freelance journalist, but it's not a tag I give myself. I give myself the social media commentator tag, but people call me a freelance journalist now. And that's what I do. I basically fill my day looking for things that are wrong and trying to correct them in China. Traveled a lot. I've cycled across China 3 times, from the east to the west, from the west to the east, and from the north to the south. I went to
Wow.
Harbin. I went to Harbin for a. Harbin is the city of ice. It's very famous as the ice capital. And I was there in the summer, working for 2 or 3 weeks, doing some teacher training, training a group of foreigners how to teach English in China. And I decided rather than fly home, I'll ride a bike. So I just picked up a bike in the local shop and went for a ride. 42 days later, got home. But you can do that when you're retired.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. We want to we'll talk about it later, how you
Sure.
bike and all your, the photos and the videos
Mm,
on social media are just amazing. So we'll talk about that.
sure.
But the first thing I want to ask is, so well, you folks went in 2001 and 2004. So China was not so prosperous at that time, right? It was still very poor. You didn't have all these the bullet trains and skyscrapers and fancy cities and all of that. So, so what made you like that? Because I would have thought so people like you, so Jerry, like you came from a very, very well developed nations like the UK and Australia. So one would think that you would have thought, oh my God, this country is so poor, and I want to get out of here as soon as possible. So what was that? That I mean, did you guys feel or know that China is going on develop in the future, or was it something else that drew you to China and made you stay there?
Well, I'll tell you my experience. When I first came to China, I really had no knowledge of China. I knew nothing. I just knew that I wanted to test myself and particularly my teaching skills because I'd worked for about 8 years after graduation with students that spoke Spanish, which is my native language. So I wanted to go to a place where my students did not understand me, sort of like to see how good of a teacher I was, right? So that's why I came to China, but I knew nothing. I was expecting people riding bicycles everywhere and wearing those Mao suits and whatnot. And at the moment I get off the plane in Shanghai, in the middle of the night, and I see, well, Shanghai was unique and has always been unique, but I see all these Western cars, Mercedes Benz, Audis, and some Ferraris and high scrapers, and this beautiful modern city back in 2001. I was like, hold on, this is a completely different picture. And the first thing that hit my head is, I thought it was a communist country. I mean, how do you have Ferraris and Audis and BMWs in a communist country? This is completely different from what I had expected. And from there on, it was just like turning pages, revealing a new fantastic adventure in China. It was not easy. Um, in the first 6 months, I went to about 5 or 6 different places because it was the Wild East at the time. If you were an English teacher, um, uh, I had a contract, but they shipped me out to Harbin. Yeah, they shipped me out to Mudanjiang. They shipped me out to another place, and finally I ended up where I was originally going to go. After a month and a half, I started teaching in Mudan in Xi'an. Sorry, um, didn't work out. Didn't pan out. So after like a month and a half, all my papers were not in order. So I decided to come down south, and I landed in Shenzhen around May of 2002. And Shenzhen again is one of those cities back in 2001, sorry, back in 2002, it felt like Miami. I'm quite familiar with America. Yeah, I've traveled many times. I studied there, I lived there. So it felt like, I don't know, going around the Keys. Just beautiful roads, beautiful palm trees, beautiful gardens, just the sun, the breeze, the ocean. Like I felt like, wow, this is where I want to
But hold
stay.
on, so people tell me that there's so much pollution in China. So, you cannot even breathe, you cannot even see the building next to you. And now you're telling me
There's
that Shenzhen is beautiful.
there's different areas of China, and there's different stages. The stage where I came in is after China joined the WTO. Before that, it was just effects of the reform and opening up. So it's more like nearby countries coming to set up shops. So Thailand, Vietnam, Hong Kongese, Taiwanese, they were all setting shop in this area in the south of China, Shenzhen, the special economic zone. Um, and it was kind of like a test, a pilot plan to see what can we do. Um, and that was from 79 until 2000, more or less. There were a few Western companies operating at the time, but the majority were nearby countries. Now, when China joins the WTO, it's like an influx of people coming to make things here because it was easier for them to export and make huge profits back in their countries. China has made millions of millionaires from people making things, from people trading stuff. So that had an effect on the environment that cannot be denied. However, there's always been the idea of shifting the nature of the economy in certain areas that were heavily polluted in the past. And it's a long drawn process that is now showing the results. So they put the environment as a priority after a few years, after having developed a few years. But the thing with Shenzhen is that it's coastal. So that breeze, right, is constantly um, blowing away a lot of the pollution. So you get a lot of blue skies and a lot of beautiful days in Shenzhen and Guangdong here in the south. You go to the inside of China, and it can be a little bit difficult because you don't have that breeze, you don't have that wind washing away things. It's similar to what happens to Beijing, but they get the wind from the north and from the desert, so that's where you get these dust storms and sandstorms and things like that. So it's something that did happen. There were days where you couldn't see very well, but through the efforts that they've been doing over the last decade or so, if not more, things are changing. Things, I mean, we get beautiful, beautiful blue sky days here in Dongguan, which is like 40 kilometers from Shenzhen, constantly on a very, very frequent with high frequency.
Yeah,
So
I mean, so I just want to add that if you like go online and you look at the rankings of the cities around the world based on pollution, Shenzhen is like 1,000 and something. So it has actually very, very beautiful air and beautiful cities, and you can see a lot of the videos on social media about Shenzhen, and it's also like the electronics capital of the world. So if you have a smartphone, a laptop, whatever, there must be a lot of parts from Shenzhen in your smartphone and in your laptop, etc.
I'll tell you a quick
And
story. When I first started teaching at a corporation here, it was my first corporate job here. I brought my laptop, and one of the engineers, who's still my friend, we had dinner just a week ago. So like, oh, that computer was made here, and I'm like, no, I bought it in America. You must be mistaken. So like, no, flip it around, light on.
yeah,
This is here, Dongguan. It came from here, and I'm like, okay, sit down and learn. Okay.
yeah. And in 1978, Shenzhen was like a small fishing village with like 30,000 people or so. And now it has 13 million people, and the GDP per capita is like $30,000 a year, and it's just a beautiful, beautiful, amazing city. So if you get a chance, go on social media and check out the videos.
So for me,
Okay,
it
so
was the
now,
potential. That's what kept me here in China. But onto Jerry and his experience, what got you here and got you to stay here?
yeah. So Jerry, I mean, so what made you stay in China? I mean, because I would think that somebody from the UK and Australia, he goes to China in 2004. That should have been like very scary experience.
There were scary days, but not scary in the sense of my health, my security, or my health. I mean, really, it was more scary in the sense of my self confidence. I didn't speak any Chinese at all when I came here. I was pretty much abandoned. Monday to Friday, I was at school, and everybody spoke English. Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock, I would get taken home. I get taken home every day. I had an apartment in the city. The school was 10 or 11, still is 10 or 11 kilometers outside of the city center. And I would get taken home each evening, which wasn't a big deal. But at Friday evening, I knew I would speak no English until Monday morning. And that was a little bit scary. Yeah, in that respect, it doesn't help your confidence. So you just have to learn. And, I got functional. I'm still basically functional in Chinese. I'm not as good as Fernando. I've heard him speak Chinese, and I know he does it better than me. But I can get food. I get directions. I can have a conversation with the taxi driver. It's as long as the drive is a short one, 20 minutes or so, we're okay. If I'm going to another city and I'm 2 hours in the taxi, it's going to be a quiet ride. But yeah, for the first 15 or 20 minutes, I call it taxi driver Chinese. Where do you come from? How many kids have you got? What do you do? Where do you live? Or this kind of thing. So I'm okay with functional language. As far as staying here, for me, the thing I really wanted to do was travel. And in my first year here, I found I didn't have a lot of time to travel. I was working in a school, and then in the school holidays, the first school holidays, I went home because I still called Australia home. That's a line from a song. But I still called Australia my home, and I went back and I saw my kids and had a nice holiday, then came back to China and realized I've got to have some more time here because I've been to Xi'an, of course, everyone has to go to Xi'an. I hadn't been further west than that, and I really wanted to, and it took me a year or so to get further west into places like Xinjiang, Gansu. Ningxia is a wonderful place. And talking about the pollution, yes, it was pretty bad. I never experienced until I went to Beijing in a winter and saw the really bad pollution. I never experienced it that bad, but you used to find that dirty collar marks, get home pretty dirty. But if you lived in the north during the winter, it was coal power. Everything was coal. So there was a lot of soot in the air. You could smell it, you could taste it. But here in the south, it wasn't quite so bad. It was I mean, they told me it was the equivalent of smoking a packet of cigarettes a day to live in Zhongshan when I first came here. But it's not so bad. I mean, certainly, it's not now at all. The pollution index, and I check it regularly, is nearly always less than London. It's about the same as Sydney. Now, Sydney is a city of 3 million people, and Zhongshan is a city of 4 million people, should be around about the same, and they are. And Sydney is considered to be, Australia is considered to be one of the cleanest countries in the world. But in fact, Australia's per capita emissions are much higher than China's per capita emissions. It's just a much bigger country with a lot less people. So they're making it a lot dirtier. And here in China, all the manufacturing is happening, and they're still keeping it clean. So they're doing things. A friend of mine runs a factory here, and he told me that it cost him a year of his profit to build a plant on his roof to capture all of the stuff coming out of his factory, to capture it and treat it. 1 full year's profit that he had to pay. And he had no choice. But it's an investment in a long-term future. We now have blue skies as a result of it.
Yeah, yeah.
There's also the effort of leaving money on the table, Kanthan. Back in the day when I was here in Dongguan, when I just got here, one on every 2 pairs of shoes were made in Dongguan, in the city. 50% of all the shoes in the world were made here in this city.
Wow. Yeah.
So you can imagine making shoes it's a highly polluted industry because of all the dye and all the leather and all the processing of leather. It pollutes the water quite a lot. Well, there was an effort to take this industry that was bringing billions and billions and billions of dollars a year and move it out of China, move it somewhere else. It's what they call the transitioning from a labor intensive economy to a knowledge intensive economy. And that vision is what we're enjoying today. Where there were shoe factories left and right in the city, today we have high tech factories. We have the Huawei campus here in Dongguan. I went on a tour to see a new startup company, so to speak, a few years old, that now makes electric motors for boats and ships. That's all in Dongguan. So that the shift from let's stop making things that don't add too much value to our economy, and let's start making things that add a lot of value because of innovation, because of technology, because of and that's what you find now across Guangdong. A lot of this cheap manufacturing has moved out Therefore, pollution has been reduced enormously. So that's a little thing that I wanted to add so people understand, well,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the push, the
that's right.
drive to change things and make them better.
Yes, a lot of people they take granted China's growth. So, for example, you went in 2001, and China's GDP was about 1.3 trillion dollars. And
Mm,
so now it's more than 10 times larger. Probably like 15 times larger now.
17
So to
trillion.
grow 15-fold in 22 years, and to do it step by step, well, every single year, without faltering, without having a financial crisis, without having a recession, without having like a revolt, that's very, very hard. And like you said, the most important thing was to climb up the value chain, because if China had just stuck with making shoes and the clothes, their GDP would still be very low. And as how they moved up is something that the rest of the global south, the developing nations, should really study China. So how they grew from just doing shoes to the world's best smartphones, to TVs, to the world's best the electric cars. And it's not an easy transition. It takes a lot of efforts from the government and the people. So that's a good point. So Jerry, what did you like about China in terms of the people, the places, the government? Because I would think that the three things that I would look for is, jobs. So can I make enough money? And the people, so are they nice? So can I make friends? Can I have a family? And then the places, so can I go travel? Are there good restaurants? Are there good theaters, sports, whatever, to have fun? So those
Yeah.
three would be like the most important to me. So what drew you to China?
It's probably easiest to say the thing I didn't like about China was the government. There was at that time a lot of corruption. It was quite visible. You could see it in pretty much every aspect of your daily life. Banking system was and still remains archaic. It's a very, very sluggish banking system, but that's because of the controls that they hold over the foreign currency and also money laundering, which was a big problem. I used to go to Macau a lot, and you would see the big spenders there. They were very often they were the government employees, and they had more money than government employees should have had to spend in Macau. And that's one of the things that has positively changed in a great way. There's obviously there's still corruption, but there's no systemic corruption anymore. The government was not. It was already under Hu Jintao when I came here. The government was already trying to change these things. It was struggling, but it was trying. Under Jiang Zemin, it had struggled and it didn't do very well. Once Xi Jinping got into power, it was almost like bang, overnight, things
Wow.
started to change. He really, really did. He came into power because people wanted that to happen. That's how he got into his position. He's democratically elected leader of the largest democracy in the world. It's just not called a democracy. It's called a people's whole process democracy. I call it collaborative governance. Basically,
Hmm.
he's here and he's staying in power for as long as the people want him to, because the people don't want him to leave because of what he's achieved. So I would say that governance was the thing that was the least liked thing at the time. That has completely changed now. But what at the same token, what you talked about with their economy, they had a planned economy. In the past, they had a planned economy, and their access into the World Trade Organization only, it was delayed 6 or 7 years, I think, because they said, we're not a planned economy. We are a socialist market economy. Now, America has the biggest open market economy in the world. And look at the problems America has with that open economy. It has a wealth inequality. It has massive amounts of, well, there's corruption, but it's called lobbying. It has a huge amount of billionaires and a huge amount of people living in poverty. Now, the American poverty rate is increasing. What China wanted to do was change that. And you could see that even back in 2004, if you paid attention, if you watch what the Chinese government says it will do, and then come back to it 4 or 5 years later and see what they have done, you find that that's what happens. And they were saying at the time, we're going to stamp out corruption. We're going to introduce science and technology. It was 2006, I think, where they wrote a paper on how they were going to change from this manufacturing labor-based economy into a science and technology economy. They said at the time, we're going to build high-speed rails. They said all of these things that they have now done. And it was quite clear what was going to happen as long as they had political stability. And to have political stability, they needed to remove the corruption. And they did it. They said they were going to do it, and they've done it. There's going to be people inside the system who will cheat the system. Of course, there are always going to be. But I can't put my finger on a single incident recently in the last 10 years, by recently, where I've felt I shouldn't be paying that fee, or I shouldn't be doing this thing because someone else is getting that. But I used to feel that all the time. Like Fernando, I had a small business. Again, Fernando's was bigger than mine. I ran a language center and a coffee shop. And we had to pay a fine of 10,000 RMB with no receipts. Nothing came back to us. We had to pay this as a deposit against a perceived offense that we had committed. We got inspected. This is in 2007, 2008. We got inspected by the alcohol board, the ministry of whoever does alcohol. And they said, you don't have a license to serve alcohol in this coffee shop. And we said, yes, we do. And we pulled it out. And they said, no, this is a license to clean up after selling alcohol. This is a different thing from a different department. So you're going to need to pay us 10,000 deposit. And then you're going to come for a visit. And I didn't do this. My wife had to do this. And she had to go to the government office and sign a document to say that she'd been educated. And then we had to pay for the license that we needed to sell the alcohol, and we never got the 10,000 back. That was taken as a penalty of some sort, but we never got a piece of paper to say. Yeah, it was a gift to the government official in order to smooth this transition through. So that's just one example. But that's for me, that was my worst example. But there was lots of little things. Why am I paying this? And it was somebody's form of corruption. It's all gone now. All of that is gone now. Everything is above board.
What you ask, Kanthan, is very interesting, because a lot of people are always pushing us, people talking about what we see here in China, like, you can't criticize the government. You can't criticize the government.
Yes,
and yes, you can. There's so many things that I don't necessarily like or agree with in China. But it's a matter of understanding it's a different culture. You're a guest here, and you can let it ruin your China experience, or you can move on. I'll give you a couple of examples. In China, people smoke right under a no smoking sign. That drives me crazy. I'm like, don't you? They walk with a cigarette lit on into an elevator with children, or what? That just, my skin just, I want to.
Wow!
But
that still happens.
Yeah.
Yes, it happens.
I stop them. If I see them smoking, I stop. Buchayan.
Yeah. When they come into an elevator, yes, but you see that all the time. There's also a certain degree of, they tend to be inconsiderate when it comes to parking. So somebody will block your car, they double park, and it's something that is very common here because everybody parks wherever
Sorry,
they
folks.
can.
Just 1 second, please.
Someone's
Sure.
at the
Sorry
door.
about that.
Why
Continue.
am
You
I?
can talk to me.
Why am I? So the thing is, it's just a necessity to the point that certain apps have been developed that you can actually scan the license plate of a car. There's an app on your phone, and press a button, and because every owner connects his ID and its phone
Yeah,
number
I'm connected.
to the traffic police, basically it sends that car owner a message, hey, you're blocking somebody. So just think about that for a second. How common is it that there is an app that you can scan a license plate to send a message to the driver and say, hey, come and move your car? There's also the practice of having your phone number displayed
On
on
the
the
dash.
front windshield. But yeah, that's something that upsets me quite a lot. There are other things, um, more serious things. For example, when I was working with the government, there was something that it opened my eyes a lot to what China needed to change. I worked with a translator. We were writing a book for a proposal to the United Nations on behalf of the city, and I was paid by the hour. I started work at 8 and I finished at 5, and I was in my office and my desk ready to work with my colleagues from 8 o'clock. But my colleague, that was like the person that I work with, he would just sit down and start eating breakfast at 8 o'clock, read the newspaper until 9:30, and we start working an hour and a half into my shift. I was like, why do you do this? Why do you have breakfast at home? I mean, I mean, it's money being wasted. And he said something to me that taught me a lot about what China needed to change. He said to me, I get paid the same whether I make effort or not. I was like, whoa, that's a wake up call for me. It comes from a completely different direction. So having these kind of experiences opens your eyes to different systems, to what you hope would change in a society. And today, I'll share an experience, a recent experience. I'm applying for my green card here. So I've had to do a lot of stuff, a lot of administrative stuff with the government, the Beijing government and the local government and whatnot. And one of the things that we needed to do was move my wife's household registration called the hukou from her hometown in Zhengzhou down to Dongguan. In the past, that would take 2 weeks, and she would have to go to her hometown, apply for it in her hometown, come back and do another process here in Dongguan. That's crazy. We went to do it this time around, not knowing what it would take. It was done within 3 days. And so, like, you don't have to go to your hometown. It's that simple. I'll give you another example. My wife and I, we got married in Hong Kong, right? My very, very good friend, Miguel Alves, with Jerry has met, he applied for his green card in 2021. And he said, like, I also got married in Hong Kong. So you need to go to Hong Kong and you need to notarize your wedding certificate, your marriage certificate, and bring it back to mainland China because it is different systems. I'm like, okay. So I go to Hong Kong. I do that. I spend 5,000 Hong Kong dollars doing that and come back to the Public Security Bureau. And I said, like, hey, here's my notarized wedding certificate. Like, why'd you do that for? I'm like, what do you mean? One country, two systems. We can input this information into our computers and realize that, yes, you're married. I'm like, so I didn't have to spend the money? No. Your friend has all the information. But that's 2021. Yeah. We're moving forward to make
Yes.
better, to make things easier.
Yeah.
Here's another thing. They send my wife's household registration to Dongguan, and it writes in the marital status is blank, is empty. So the guy at the public security bureau says like, this is a problem. You need to show that you're married. I'm like, oh my God, we lose another 15 days, another, because it has to, like, no, 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 go to this office, drive 5 minutes, and tell them you need to change that. Tak, tak, tak. Okay, so when do I get it? Oh, just wait 30 minutes. Go across the street to the other office and pick it up. It was done in under 2 hours, something that used to take so much time before. So I've told you a story of procrastination, of not serving the people, of exploiting the system, to a system that has become so satisfying to use as a citizen, as a resident, as a person who needs services from the government. And it's been wonderful, and I love the opportunity to share this with our audiences. It's a country that is changing, and
Yeah.
it's tangible. You can experience it, you can feel it, you can talk about it. So yeah.
Okay. So, since you both have, been to the developed nations, so how would you compare China's, I mean, the infrastructure, in terms of roads, railways, buildings, electricity, cell phone, 5G, and all of that? Because you hear a lot of the stereotypes that, the Chinese products are bad. The buildings are all the tofu drags, and whatever China does, it's going to be low quality. So, what is your experience? We'll start with Jerry.
Completely the opposite. The reason China's manufacturing was low quality was because the customers for China's manufacturing were high profit, low cost customers. They came to China from places like Europe, UK, and the United States, Canada, and the rest of the world. And any capitalist corporation is doing the same thing. They're trying to drive down costs whilst driving up margins. When you start doing that, you have to have some kind of compromise, quality control compromise. Now, there is a point at which some corporations, for example, Apple, make fantastic products, really great products. I hate Apple as a corporation. I love Apple products, but I don't use them because I don't like the system that they do. They're constantly driving down costs. Now, what they do, they don't drive down costs by driving down quality. They drive down costs by constantly shifting to cheaper areas. And now they're trying to get out of China, but they can't. They're locked into China. And Tim Cook has admitted this. He's locked into China because it has he said in America, he would be hard pushed to fill a theater with engineers, but in China, he can fill a football field or two football fields with engineers. That's the difference. Now, the quality issues were not China's quality issues. China could always have built good things. It could always have built high quality things, and it's proven that. What China has done when it went to the high speed rail, for example, they got Bombardier from Canada, they got Siemens from Germany, they got the French company, that name escapes me, and wasn't Hitachi, one of the big Japanese brands, to come into China and to share their technology. That's what they did. And those companies came and they shared. This is not stealing IP. This is not theft. This is a contracted deal. They didn't have to do it. They came, they made a lot of money doing it. China then took the best of their products and has built 45,000 kilometers of high-speed rail, compared to the United States, which has 0 kilometers of high-speed rail. And the one they say is high-speed is actually slower than Guangzhou's fastest metro. So it's not high-speed. Guangzhou has a metro that goes faster than, I think it's in Florida. Florida's high-speed rail. So there's been one crash, and it was in Wuhan or in Hubei 15 years ago, when the train was going too fast for a particular bend. There was a crash, and I think some people died and many people were injured. and it was terrible. And what they did was immediately bring the speed down from 380 to 320 kilometers an hour and say, no train is going to go above that until we have resolved these issues. Now, most trains now travel around 300 to 320 kilometers an hour. Perfectly safe. I've been on dozens of them. I've been to Shanghai, I've been to Beijing, I've been to Xinjiang by train. Perfectly safe. I have no fear. I don't have a fear of flying, but I'd much rather catch a train. It's much easier,
Yeah.
much simpler. Get on the train. It's fantastic. Now, where is the quality issue? There hasn't been a crash in China in I don't know how many years. And while we've been on this show for the last 45 minutes, there has probably been one in the USA. That's the difference between our two countries. Bridges are collapsing. They're not made of tofu. They were good bridges 50 years ago. They're 50 years old and they haven't been properly maintained. America recognizes and acknowledges this, and Biden has looked for the funding to get it fixed, but can't get it fixed. Now, there's another problem. You've got a president who says, we've got a problem, let's fix it. And you've got a Congress or a Senate that says, nah, not really. We'll spend our money on something else. We've got better things to spend money on. Whereas China doesn't have that issue. They say, we have a problem, let's fix it. And the whole country says, yes, let's fix it. That's how China works. Quality control in China, second to none. They've been to the moon. They're going to send people to the moon. They'll probably get there before the first guy. Actually, America wants to send a colored woman to the moon, whereas China just wants to send someone to the moon. We don't need the wokeism about this. Let's just get people back to the moon so we can do what we need to do from the moon and beyond. That's what China is saying. And the difference, they've been to Mars. Even the Mars rover from the United States has got a Chinese camera on it. The Insta360 is on a Chinese camera is on an American rover, Mars rover. Sorry, not moon, Mars. So when you start thinking like that, quality control is not the issue. The issue is cost. And China builds great quality. Now, a lot of people in China do complain about this. We send the best things overseas and keep the crap for ourselves. A lot of Chinese people say that, and to an extent, it's true. There's some issues like that. I mean, the French do the opposite with their wines. They send all the crap wines overseas and they keep the good stuff for themselves. If you travel through France, you'll know this. So I think
we send the best coffee to the world. We send the best coffee to the world and keep the crap for our consumers in Colombia.
Colombian coffee.
Yeah. SL, I wanted to explain something. One of the issues that gave China that bad quality reputation was actually the customer. The people who came here to do a lot of OEM, original equipment manufacturers, they knew that this factory could do something, but let's just put my brand on it. So a lot of people build fortunes, small fortunes, by branding things with their own thing. So they'll take, for example, a North Face jacket. Okay, just drop that, put my own thing there, but what's the best price you can get me? And people would say, I can make it for $5, I can make it for $10, I can make it for $20. Oh, give me the $5 one, it's fine. So China will make what you want, what you ask them to make. And that was detrimental to the image of China, because a lot of people were so focused on just getting the highest profits possible. I can get this made in China for $2. I can get this made in Russell Peters, makes jokes about that, right? You can get things done so cheaply here, but then again, the quality is going to suffer. That was a short-sighted thing from China's perspective. That could have been regulated in a better way, so that the image of Chinese manufacturing wouldn't have suffered. But I have a friend who did that. That was his whole thing. Hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, just getting people to do things for him and slap his name on the sticker. That's it, and it's my own product. But yeah, the image of China's manufacturing was affected by that.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I can think of is the Tesla cars. So if you look at with Tesla cars, 50% of all the Tesla cars in the world, they're now actually made in China. And when we say made in China, they're actually made in China. Okay, so
Every
they're
part,
not just
every
being
component.
assembled.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So something like 95% of all the parts and the components of a Tesla car that are made in the Shanghai, the Gigafactory, they're actually made by Chinese firms. So you look at the Tesla chassis, the Tesla door, the Tesla screens, the windshields, the wheels, blah, blah, blah. The battery,
The big one is
the
the
most
batteries.
expensive. Yeah. So the most expensive part in like an electric vehicle is the battery. And where does Tesla get its batteries from? From
CATL.
Ride and from the CATL and things like that. So yeah, like you said, Fernando and Jerry. Well, if you want, well, you can get very high quality products from China, but it's up to the person who is doing the purchase. So that's a good point.
Mm.
So let's see what's next.
Did you see the comment that just came up? It was a joke, I think. China has a lot of catching up to do to catch India.
That's a
I've
good
never been
joke.
to India, so no comment.
Yeah.
I've never been
No.
to India either, so I have no comment on that.
Yeah. So we are like we're 20 years behind China,
Right.
in like most of the things in terms of the infrastructure, manufacturing, the exports, patents, research and development. I
Mm.
mean, the
I think it was a joke.
university.
I,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think I think it was a joke.
yes,
It
it
must have
must
been a
be.
joke.
So, okay, so the next one short question. I mean, I think we talked about it, but so people always say, "Oh, you don't have freedom in China. You cannot do Facebook. You cannot do Twitter, and you cannot." So how do you guys deal with the lack of freedom? So how did you manage to live for? But hold on. So we're doing a StreamYard right now. So
Yeah.
you have that freedom, obviously. But then somebody would say, "Oh, that's because they're foreigners." But the
Because
local
we're paid by the
people,
CCP to do it.
Did you get your check
yeah,
this month?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But if you
I'm
talk to
still
the
waiting.
local people, they're all like robots walking around with a programmed social credit score.
Yeah.
So how do you answer that?
Okay, I can answer this. I'm good. I'll go first on this one, Fernando, if that's all right with you.
Yep.
There is no social credit score. There is no law saying you can't use a VPN. In fact, I've challenged people on X about this quite often. When people say, "Oh, you must work for the CCP because you've got a VPN and you're in China," I send them a link to the Chinese criminal law code and say, "Can you please find and tell me, because I can't find it. Here it is, the Chinese criminal code in English. Go read it and tell me where is the law that says I can't use a VPN." There is no law that says you can't use a VPN. There are laws against selling and trading VPNs, but there's no law against using VPNs. Every
Think
single student that
think
I ever,
Amsterdam. Think Amsterdam and weed.
yeah, Amsterdam and weed, same thing, yeah. Almost every student I've ever had has access to Facebook and YouTube. I have loads of Chinese followers, loads of them inside of China, and they're using it. It's very commonly used. Now, if I were to sell, I've got a VPN that allows me 5 devices, and let's say I only want to use one, and I want to sell the other 4. Now I commit an offense under the Communications Act. And then you see these headlines that say, "Oh, this person was fined 200,000 for using a VPN." No, they weren't. they were fined 200,000 for using a VPN to operate an illegal business. That's what they got fined for. But the media will leave that little bit off. If you read the story down in the 4th or 5th paragraph, you might see that they were operating a pornography site or something like that, which actually is illegal. Now, that's one of the freedoms that Americans might say, well, you can't get OnlyFans in China. Okay, you can't get OnlyFans in China.
You only
I'm
get
sorry
pants.
about that. You cannot, you can, through a VPN, you can get pornography in China, and there is pornography in China, but it's underground, it's illegal, and it's not normal. You can criticize the government. You do have free speech. You can go to church. All of these things are perfectly normal. What you cannot do is you cannot incite a riot or a protest. You can protest if you have a problem with your government or with your banking system. And it's been seen. People have been out there protesting all the time. And every time it happens, they show it and say, look, all these people in China are protesting. And without realizing they're contradicting their own narrative. The narrative is you can't protest, but look, these people are protesting. And we keep seeing them. We had them at the end of COVID. We had them with the banking problem in Zhengzhou. I think it was one city that had and again, that was a form of corruption. There was local government had invested their money badly. So the people got out there and protested. We've had protests in various different places, even against Apple or Foxconn, Apple's supplier in China, who is a Taiwanese company, which is a Taiwanese company. So protests happen, but you have a constitutional right to protest. You have a constitutional right to freedom of speech. You have a constitutional right to freedom of religion in China. But there are some limitations on what you can do, and those limitations are absolutely no different to the limitations that you have in the UK. In fact, in the UK recently, they imposed a law called the Online Safety Law, where the limitations in the UK are much stronger than the limitations in China, and the penalties are much harsher. The penalty in China for me, if I come online on Chinese media and start talking about Tiananmen Square, they'll say they'll censor me, they'll take me off. If I keep putting it on there, they'll give me a call. Can you come to the police station for a chat? They'll find out what my gripe is and they'll talk to me about this. If I continue to do it, then I'll get into trouble because I've been told, I've been removed, I've been told, and now I'm continuing to do it. I'm now a troublemaker. That's the limitation on it. So the reason, and they say in the West, they'll say, you can't talk about Tiananmen Square. Well, the reason I can't talk about Tiananmen Square is because A, I wasn't there, B, I'm not an expert on it, and C, there is a narrative about what really happened, and Chinese government have put this out and told people what really happened. I think 204 was the number of people who were killed. Many of them were police officers and military. The government has acknowledged this as a mistake during its process of learning how to handle things. And guess what? It's nearly 35 years ago, and it's never happened since. So who learned from this? Every single day in America, people die because of police overreaction. The last time a person was killed by the police in China, I think, was 2018. In Hong Kong, not a single person was killed by the police during all of those protests, all of those riots. Not a single person was killed. So it looks to me very much like the Chinese government have learned from the mistakes of the past and corrected them. Now, you can't complain about a government that does that. If a government doesn't kill its own people, surely that's a pretty good government. If a government does kill its own people at the rate of more than 3 people a day, every day, that's a pretty bad government. That's the way I'd look at it. And yet I've got people in America telling me you live in an oppressive state. No, you are getting shot at by your police. I've never seen a police officer shoot anybody here. Have you? And everybody in America knows somebody who has been a victim. They have 100,000 gun deaths a year. Many of them are suicides, but China has none, not one, not a single gun death a year.
I mean, also, by the way, the U.S. is like 4.5% of the world's population. But if you look at the prison population, the US
25%.
accounts for like 25%.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so much
And they
freedom.
say that in China they execute more criminals, but it's a state secret how many they execute. Well, how do you know they execute more criminals? Most people in
Ah,
China, most people in China are actually sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve. They're not actually executed. They have a 2-year good behavior bond. They go to prison. 2 years later, it's commuted to life. Life in prison means a minimum of 9 years. So 11 years later, they could be out. The CEO of the milk factory, remember
oh
the
yeah,
the tainted milk
powdered
factory,
milk.
will be released from prison this month.
Okay.
She was
So
sentenced to
that
death.
happened in
El-
2008 or 9.
11 years ago, she was sentenced to death. She had a
Mhm.
2-year suspended death sentence, commuted to life imprisonment, 9 years of life in prison, 9 years of imprisonment. She's now ready for release. Now, some people might say that's a bad thing. Personally, I say that's a pretty good thing. She will have been rehabilitated, and that's what prisons do in China. They actually rehabilitate rather than punish.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's another big topic, but I think, that's exactly what happened in with Xinjiang, you know.
Mm,
So when the Chinese government, finds like an extremist or a person who's about to become a terrorist, they focus on reforming the person.
yes,
So their goal is not really to punish the person, to kill the person. No, they want to change a person to a good citizen. And if that
yep,
person becomes a good citizen and wants to contribute
mm,
to the prosperity of Xinjiang, there would be no one much happier than the Chinese government.
yeah.
It's
This
a
is the
very
thing:
different,
rehabilitation and re-education, very, very important in China. Yeah,
yeah, and it's a very different. I mean, the Eastern, the Confucian philosophy. Its goal is not just, yeah, it's a very different way to look at things in life.
mm,
The
Yeah.
experience of Xinjiang has taught me a lot about misinformation. Somebody was asking in the comments about my documentary and my trips. So just to share very briefly to people, since 2022, January 2022, I started traveling around China, filming the documentary. It's going to be released on October 1st of this year to celebrate
Oh
the
wow.
75th anniversary of China. So I'm still hard at work. And through that experience of traveling to every single region of China, the mainland, I spent 5 months in Xinjiang. I drove more than 15,000 kilometers in Xinjiang,
Wow.
self-driving. I visited more than 40 locations, from big cities to small villages to just a couple of houses by the road. And what I show in my documentary and in my short videos, which is like separate different things, it has become a thorn on the side of a lot of these Western diaspora Uyghurs that are trying to attack Xinjiang with no evidence whatsoever. I'll give you a couple of examples. There was this Uyghur journalist in Washington, a journalist from VOA. I forgot his name at the moment, and they made a whole piece about him being a Uyghur, and he said that if he wears his woven hat in Urumqi, he would be deemed a separatist. So the moment that I see this, I walk up to a livestock market and I show like, do you see the hundreds and hundreds of people wearing woven hats without any repercussion to their freedom, to their lives at all?
you get the blue woven hat.
Ah, not the green ones.
Yeah,
Maybe that's the thing. Yeah. I mean, what I'm trying to say, the work that I've done in putting together these videos out there on the internet, had made it very difficult for them to lie. I mean, how do
Yeah.
you Jerry introduced me to a concept before I went to Xinjiang the first time in 2021. Jerry introduced me to an idea that the genocide vibe. If you go to a place where people are scared, where people are afraid, where there's a genocide going on, just check any Twitter or X posts on Gaza. You can see the fear of people in their eyes. You can feel the tension. You can feel the despair. You can feel the anger. It's a vibe. And you go to Xinjiang and you see absolutely no vibe. I have a hashtag in X called Uyghur Genocide Vibe. It doesn't exist. I look at children.
Mm.
If there's a genocide going on, children wouldn't be roaming the streets freely any time of the day, let alone at night. There's so many children that are just playing out in the streets, just enjoying their childhood and their free time. I had an experience that was so surreal. We went out into a very small town called Sache, and I was the only foreigner there. It's not a touristy place. It's not a, so it's kind of like I stand out, right? Particularly with my cameras and whatnot. So some kids had seen me the night before out in town, just walking around, taking shots. 6 o'clock in the morning, they come to my trailer, to my RV, and they knock on the door. I'm like, what is this? Who knocks on a trailer, right? I open the door. It's four kids,
Mm.
ages 5 to 7. Oh, we want to see. We know that you have two cats and a dog in your trailer. Can we come in? I'm like, and they start just walking around my trailer, playing with my cats, playing with my dogs, telling us what they do. And like, if there was a genocide taking place, children would not. There would be fear of
Yeah.
of what's gonna happen if I go knocking on this foreigner's trailer.
I
Um,
mean,
none of that is visible. None of that is visible.
yeah, it's so stupid, like they bomb, they drop bombs on Gaza, and then they say that it's not a genocide. And then you see this beautiful Xinjiang where they have amazing buildings, amazing infrastructure, and the technology. You see the Xinjiang farmers using the high tech with tractors and stuff to do the harvesting of cotton, and they have bullet trains, and then they go genocide. Man, it's
Yeah,
just like nonsensical propaganda, you
it
know?
beggars belief. It really does. I've
Yeah.
cycled through Xinjiang twice now, 2014 and 2019. I didn't spend as long as Fernando did, but when you're riding, you don't drive through the villages. Every time you get to a village, you stop for a break. Every village is 30, 40 kilometers away. That's a 90-minute, 2-hour ride. It's time for a break. So you stop and you have a break and you go into a local shop and you sit down. Oh, sorry. And everyone is very, very welcoming. Oh, what are you doing here? Can we have photographs with you? Foreigners are just so welcome. You just wouldn't get that in an area where there is any kind of oppression or persecution, let alone a genocide. And of course, to say that their culture is being genocide, which is the next thing, they keep
Mm.
scaling it back. To say that their culture is being genocided or they're forced laboring, all of these things, just go there. And there's the other thing. People say, well, you can't go there. You must belong to the CCP because it's the only reason you can go to Xinjiang. Absolutely not true. Anybody with a visa or anybody who's in China, legally in China, can legally, openly visit. You can ride in there, you can fly in there, you can catch a train, you can drive in there. There's no restriction on anybody who is allowed to be in China to be in Xinjiang. Simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only restriction is border areas. Like when you get to border areas,
It's a
you need to
control,
get
not
a
a
permit.
restriction. Mm.
Exactly, it's a control. So you need a little pass,
Oh,
and it's not
sorry,
just
yeah,
foreigners,
sorry, yeah,
any Chinese
border areas.
person.
Yes, sorry, that's right. If you're traveling to the border, you need to every town you go into, every city you go into, you pass through a checkpoint. This is
Okay.
everyone does, not just us, everybody, because they had a massive amount of terrorism there. They've reduced
Yeah.
that to zero. There is no
Mm.
terrorism in Xinjiang now, no terrorism in China now because of this, because all the terrorism in China was caused by the Xinjiang separatists who were paid by the NED. NED admits they do this. Go on,
Yeah.
Fernando.
I
Yeah.
You can
like
say
I like
something.
to add something else. Like
Yeah.
these security checks that I mean in 2021 there were quite a few. Now 2023 when I was there, drastically reduced. Why? CCTV cameras with facial ID.
Yeah.
But there's another thing to add. It's not about the Uyghurs. It's not about Xinjiang. Why can I tell you so? Because I've also spent 3 months in Yunnan, uh, 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 another province another region that borders with several countries. They also have
I bet.
checkpoints because they just, I mean, you got to understand that these borders might not be easy to secure, right? Think about Texas, what's taking place. So they need to make sure that the people who are walking around, going in and out, moving in and out, are legal. So there's checkpoints.
So it takes like what, like maybe 5 minutes to go through the checkpoint?
It
If
it
you're a
takes
Chinese
locals.
citizen, yes,
Go on.
Jerry, if you're a Chinese citizen, you basically roll down your window, you look at a camera, and you hand your ID. You're out of there in 2 seconds. And it's both sides of a car, for example. So the
Yeah.
passengers can look to the right, the driver looks to the left, and you're done. Because you're a foreigner, you don't have a 身份证, you don't have an ID, you have to get out of your car and go into the office. Um, but the questions are always the same, like where were you? Where are you going? Where are you staying? So through my many thousands of kilometers in Xinjiang, I prepared a list. So basically, I printed it. I said, like, boom, here's my 2 pages of my travel log, basically, and okay, so to just add it to the list, and it made the next stop easier. But again, as I was saying in one of my videos, when I went in 2021, I went to Hetian or Hotan, in the southern part of Xinjiang, and we traveled about 50 or 60 kilometers. There were at least 8 to 10 checkpoints. One every village had a checkpoint, and that was, as a foreigner, kind of like, this is annoying.
It
Today,
is.
you can go to a place where you can drive 300 kilometers and there's no checks. They only check when you exit the highways, for example. So it's being reduced dramatically. I made a time lapse video when I drove 100 kilometers, and my camera is taking photo all the way to this other place, 120 kilometers something. No checkpoints. Huge difference because that's not necessary anymore. Now technology has taken over. The cameras will look at your face. They know, oh, this person is registered in a database. This person, we recognize this person. This person has been here. This person is authorized to be here. Camera picks up somebody who crossed the border illegally. Ooh, now that's an alert. We need to go figure out who this person is and why he's here. And that's when they deploy a team to go find this person who should not be here, who has not been registered.
Yeah.
So all these portrait photos that you see of Uyghurs, oh, look at this. How do you get their biometrics without taking photos of people? How do you fill this database of information without taking a photo of the people?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm
Right.
saying?
I
So
mean,
that's
so like if you look at, what the US does, in terms of, I mean, the NSA, the CIA, they're the biggest spying machine, okay? And they've been spying on the whole world through the internet,
Mm.
the computer software, the hardware, the hard drives in your laptop. They spy on you on behalf of the NSA wherever you live, and all the fiber optic, the connections around the world. So you just have to look at the revelations from Snowden.
Children.
The U.S. spies on the whole world, and then they have the balls to talk about China's surveillance, which is for, the defensive purposes.
I watched a BBC report just a month or so ago talking about these new cameras that can recognize and identify people. So it's okay for the UK, but it's not okay for China.
Exactly. So whatever China does, it's bad. Okay. If China plants the trees, they would say it's bad. If China's say pollution goes down, they would say, but what about all the doctors who are focusing on lung cancer and now they will be jobless because of the CCP poverty, pollution reduction.
They were moving too fast on cancer cures, that's for sure. That was
Yeah.
a headline. China
Mhm.
moves too fast on cancer cures.
But at what
What
cost?
cost? Oh my God. Okay. All right. So we've been on for 1 hour and 15 minutes. So how about one last question?
Sure.
So, so you two know China very well, and you have a very good understanding of the geopolitics, the global economy. So you're very, very well rounded, both of you. So where do you see China 5 to 10 years from now? So is the economy going to collapse? Will there be a massive revolution? So what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
I would like to go first, if I may, Jerry. I made a video called Chinese Poor. Chinese poor are not so poor. With this poverty alleviation and the eradication of abject poverty, this is setting the foundation for the development of the largest middle class population in any country. It's going to drive the world's economy to a level that nobody can actually picture right now. Like when they started pushing for electric vehicles, nobody thought China was going to go anywhere with it. Look at them today. So this massive amount of middle class consuming and purchasing and traveling and it's going to make China the most attractive destination for any kind of investment, for any kind of business that wants to just jump on this train. This is the time to do it. This is why Starbucks is investing so much. This is why there's so many uh, restaurant businesses, services doing business in China, because that's what is going to happen. Chinese poor are not so poor. And in that video, I take people through a 10-year lapse of a kid without no university education, a kid that works in a factory. Well, a kid that works in a factory marries a girl that works in a factory, and together they both bring in about $2,000 a month and had very little expenses because of the way factories were built here in China that provide bed and not bed and breakfast, room and board, and it allowed them to save some money. So at the turn of 10 years, these people have 30, 40, $50,000 saved because they might be promoted along this 10 years, and they go out and then buy their first property, and the property rises in valuation because the government develops infrastructure, and then they sell and they get a profit and buy something else or buy another one. In a matter of 10 or 15 years, which is the question you're asking, these poor that were brought to a level where they can actually be productive with roads, with internet, with facilities that connects them to the world, to China's economy, they're going to be the next middle class that's out there drinking Starbucks, that's out there buying iPhones. Not today, but in 15, 10 years, you won't find a better market, better than it is right now, than China. So that's what I see.
Yeah, I agree. But last year, if you look at, the Tesla sales, they were pretty much the same in China and the US. So just together, these two countries made up like 70% of all the Tesla sales in the world. And the same thing with the iPhones. Uh, Apple sold 47 million iPhones in China last year. And if you look at the sales of, BMW, Prada, whatever, well, you can see, how big China's middle class is. And then, like you said, if you look at the technology, where they're going in terms of the artificial intelligence, electric vehicles, drones, but quantum computing, solar panels, batteries, blah, blah, blah. They have the plans very well set for the next few years. So,
That's the
Jerry,
biggest difference. Just sorry, just one final thing, Kanthan, if I may. It seems like Chinese people know that there is a blueprint that they can follow in order to improve their lives, and it's not a quick fix. It's not make money quick like so many schemes in the West. It's do the work, and in 10, 15 years you'll have a much better life. And you've seen it, you've seen your parents doing it, so now the kids are happy to do it. There's a level of trust in this blueprint that has been presented, that it works, that they're happy to follow it. Sorry, I interrupted, Jerry.
absolutely no. That's great. So, Jerry, so what is your take on the collapse of China?
It's not going to happen, I'm afraid. There's going to be a few disappointed Gordon Changs out there. I can't add much more to what I think the next 10 or 15 years is going to do, other than what Fernando has already said. But it comes down to something. I can add something to why this is happening. There is a thing in behavioral psychology called dimensions of culture. And one of the dimensions of culture is long-term orientation. In America, long-term orientation is very, very low. In China, Japan, Korea, places like that, long-term orientation is very, very high. What this means is Chinese people will work very, very hard today for a future that they know is improving. Now, historically, we go back 20 years in China, but Chinese people go back 5,000 years. We don't think like they think. And probably the same in India. We as Westerners don't think the same way that you think in India. This long-term orientation means that they know that, and they have an expression for it, they need to eat bitterness. They know that things will be tough right now. Now, things are not tough. There are challenges. Of course, there are challenges with the youth unemployment, the aging population, the property, which is not a collapse, but a restructure. There's a lot of things going on in China at the moment which are setting the scene for the future. So the long-term orientation is coupled with the government stability. We don't have government changes every 5 years. What we do have is policy changes every year. March, we've got the 2 sessions coming up, and there will be some policy changes, but they are tweaks, they are changes. New laws might be introduced to change something that wasn't right in the past. This is all done through consultation. This thing that they call the rubber stamp parliament is working very hard behind the scenes. Right now, people are involved in changing what's going to happen in the future. And it's a long-term focus that they know in 20 years' time, China, in fact, less than 20 years, in 10 years' time, China will have 800 million middle-class people. And those 800 million middle-class people will be the consumers of the tourism industry, the services industry, the manufacturing industry. They will be. China is the future. There is no question about that. Europe and the UK are stagnant. America is growing slightly, but they tend to, they say China lies about its figures. It doesn't. The World Bank recognizes China's numbers as being accurate, and it recognizes America's numbers as not being accurate. So, everything that America says China does is what they're doing. The
Like
future is
psychological projection.
Yes. Basically, you could turn everything upside down. That America says, go the opposite. And that's the long-term, or the short-term, medium-term future for China. It will remain a socialist country. It will be an open market socialist controlled country, which is a dichotomy. These things don't agree with each other. It's a socialist country that has capitalist features. China, it's basically socialism with Chinese characteristics. It's Chinese. The future is great.
Awesome. All right, folks, thank you very, very much. This was a fantastic conversation, and we covered so many topics with very unique perspectives. So I thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
so maybe we can meet like 6 months or 8 months from now and do this one more time.
That
We
would
would
be
love to
great.
do that. Yes. Mm.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
And
Okay.
thanks
Thank you,
everybody
folks.
else. We had well over 300 people watching today. So
Oh, wow.
thank you all.